What is up, fam? It's your boy Paul P. Henny, and this is the One Day at a Time podcast with Paul A. Henderson. That's right, we're still learning what it means to take things one day at a time. So today, actually, what we're doing is we are looking at a thought, okay? We're looking at a thought. And here's that thought, fam. Don't allow other people's thoughts about you or your abilities to hinder you from tapping into your potential. That's right. Don't allow other people's thoughts about you or your situation or your abilities to hinder you from tapping into your potential. Fam, let me be real with y'all, okay? That's actually a thought from chapter 1 from my book, Slave No More, Conquering the Master Within. Fam, think about this. Anyone who has been successful with anything, anything, more than likely they face some sort of pushback, especially if they were doing something new. You might be doing something new that is out of the norm for your community. But if you are really convicted about that thing, that is something that you're really supposed to be doing, you can't afford to succumb to the opinions of others. Here's the reality. Some of us really struggle when it comes to the opinions of others about ourselves or our abilities. And in others of us, we don't really care. We're going to do whatever it is that we believe that we're supposed to be doing, no matter what others think. I was thinking about this, and as a matter of fact, I was thinking about one of my favorite sports to watch, which is football, okay? There was this guy named Bill Walsh. Now, some of us may know of him as the coach for the 49ers when they were winning all of those Super Bowls. And some people know him as the father of the West Coast offense. Now, I'm not here to get into the nitty gritty of the West Coast offense, because quite honestly, I probably can't even explain it. I really want to take time to look at the thought. You see, at the time that he developed the West Coast offense, that was a completely different school of thought for how teams thought that they should execute their offense. So he actually developed this before he was the coach of the San Francisco 49ers. He actually developed this when he was the offensive coordinator for the Cincinnati Bengals between 1968 and 1970. And I tell you what, there was so much pushback. He had so much pushback. The reality is he knew his players and he knew their skill set. And in his mind, he said, you know what? If I use this player with this skill set and I use this strategy, we might be able to find some success. And guess what, fam? One day at a time, he began to perfect this strategy. He began to tweak it based on the ingredients that he had. Eventually, he became the coach for the San Francisco 49ers and won multiple Super Bowls. Here's the reality. Not only did he win multiple Super Bowls, as a matter of fact, you think about Jerry Rice, Joe Montana, Steve Young, they all came through that system of the West Coast offense. Those are the players. But he also had coaches on that staff. You know, the Mike Shanahans and the Mike Holmgrens, who also used that same West Coast offense, maybe with their own little spin on it, but they also won Super Bowls. And then you have guys like Andy Reid, who used that same West Coast offense system along with others, and they also won Super Bowls. Now, let's go back to Bill Walsh when he was developing this thing. There were many opinions out there about him and about what he was doing. But one day at a time, he stayed true to it and said, you know what? I believe that this will work. There was some tweaking that he had to do along the way, right? There was definitely some tweaking that he had to do along the way in order to perfect it based on the players that he had. But here we are 50 something years later, and we're still seeing the West Coast offense, and we're still seeing it be successful today in the NFL. Wow. Wow. Now I think about a Bible character. Now I told you all, I'm a Christian, so a lot of times when I read the Bible, I read it, for spiritual growth. I read it, to shape my biblical worldview, if you will. But sometimes I just simply read it for just practical life lessons. And one of my favorite stories in the Bible is David and Goliath. David and Goliath. Now let's think about this story. David went out there and volunteered. This guy, who was very young at the time, volunteered to take on this giant. Now, he was out there with the entire Israelite army of experienced warriors, experienced soldiers, guys who had been fighting and had been warring for quite some time. But they were all afraid of this giant. David went out there and said, you know what? I'm willing to take on the task of fighting this giant. As a matter of fact, one thing I like about this story is this was the first time I think I ever saw somebody talking trash. This shepherd boy go out there amongst all these warriors and starts talking trash to this giant. Here's the thing. I really believe that David went out there with confidence because he knew the training that he had been doing when nobody was looking. Nobody was there to see him take on that bear as he was shepherding the sheep. As he was taking care of the sheep, nobody was out there to see him take on the lion. Fam, he knew what he was doing in order to take care of those sheep, protecting those sheep from wild beasts. And one day at a time, whether people were there, whether people knew what he was doing or not, his task was to take care of the sheep. Beast or not, he's going to take care of the sheep one day at a time. Every opportunity that David had to protect the sheep from a wild beast played a role in the puzzle that he was putting together in order to not only face the giant, but to become victorious over that giant. Now think about it, fam. When David went out there as a shepherd, refusing to wear the armor, of the soldiers, and refusing to use the weapons that the traditional soldier would use in order to face this giant, do you think that David faced the opinions of others? You better believe he did, right? He goes out there with a sling and some stones. I can only imagine the opinions that he heard of others, right? I can only imagine the opinions that he heard of others as he went out there just looking ill-equipped, ill-prepared. But the reality is that he was prepared. And thousands of years later, we're still talking about this story. Mind you, one day at a time, he was in training. He knew what he had done in order for him to get to that point to where he was prepared to take on the giant. Not only the slings and the stone, but he knew that the Lord was on his side and that the Lord would not only protect him, but strengthen him as he went forth to face that giant. Now, I think about my personal story. One part of my personal story is when my family decided to move to Detroit. I'll be honest with you. A common thought or a common reaction when we were in Virginia that we got when we said that we were moving to Detroit was, Detroit? Why y'all moving up there, right? I can't tell you how many times we heard that. And as a matter of fact, there were definitely concerns and opinions about us moving our family from Richmond, Virginia, all the way to Detroit, Michigan. We didn't know anybody up here. And once again, that common thought was Detroit. But what's funny is when we moved up here, there were actually a few people that said, why y'all move up here? And I'm like, well, thank you for the welcome. Thank you for the warm welcome to this cold state. Here's the thing, fam. We knew that this was where God was taking us. We knew that this was a part of the story that God was writing or had already written for our lives. So we had to do our very best to put the opinions of others aside and pursue the calling, pursue the purpose that was in front of us. So fam, here is what I want us to do as we wrap up today. I want us all to lock in. Lock in to your purpose. Lock into your calling. Lock in to your potential. We have to figure out a way to block out the negative noise that's contrary to our calling. Block out the opinions of others. We have to focus, put those blinders on so that we can focus on our goal. We're in this together because I'm blocking that noise out right along with you. And remember, fam, together, we're learning, we're growing, and together we are blocking out the noise and the opinions of others, one day at a time. You got this.